Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of SEOs Getting Coffee. Today, we're missing a co-host, Sean. He is not with us today because he's off gallivanting on holiday. And it's only me, but I am joined by a really, really wonderful, brilliant guest. Dana is here with us. Dana is the lead instructor and the founder of KP Playbook. And I'll let her introduce herself. We'll be talking about her favorite topic. And if you don't know who Dana is, you're crazy because she is like the lead when it comes to reporting. So our topic today is obviously going to be about reporting, and we're going to be talking about reporting to the C-suite in particular. Dana, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. So yeah, as you mentioned, I'm founder and lead instructor at KickPoint Playbook, which is a training website that we built out of our agency, KickPoint, of which I am president and partner, because we were finding that a lot of people weren't necessarily, they go to school for digital marketing, but they wouldn't learn everything that they actually needed to learn in order to do this job on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of what we do is kind of learning on the job, but especially if you're, working at a small agency, or if you're in a house, you might feel really alone when it comes to, I have no one else to bounce ideas off of. And so that's why we started the training website. So we have 2 courses up on there right now, Practical GA4 and Analytics for Agencies. We'll be adding more SEO focused courses as well, because actually my background is SEO. This is my 24th year working in the field.
Oh,
And I
wow.
started in 2000 making websites. And my very first client said to me, why am I not on Google? And I said, I don't know. I'll get back to you. And then I found SEO, and it turns out I really liked SEO, and I did that basically full time until around 2017 when we started getting more into analytics and reporting. And then that is what captured my attention from that point onward. So definitely still do SEOs, particularly technical SEO, but a lot of my focus is obviously in analytics and reporting, which is what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that combination of like SEO and reporting that for me makes you like brilliant and exciting to talk to, because what I found is that some SEOs are brilliant at the SEO bit, not so brilliant at the reporting bit,
And I think that
particularly.
that's okay as
Yeah.
long as are in a place where you can get away with that. Not a
Yeah.
lot of SEOs necessarily are, right? And I
Yeah.
think that where SEO, the barrier of entry to this field is you have a laptop. And so I think that that's why it's really important for us to differentiate ourselves by really thinking about business goals and everything else. And I think that that's where, SEOs can really fall down. Like, let's get paid. And we get paid by doing good reporting. And the paid people are much better at this than the SEO people are. So come on, SEOs, let's step it up.
Yeah, no, I agree, because we also we provide other services, not just SEO. And because I come from in-house, I'm used to like reporting has to be reporting across all of the channels,
Yeah.
and it needs to be like robust and good reporting. But I was surprised how many agencies I found while in-house were great at the PPC reporting, but then terrible at the SEO. So yeah,
Yep.
it's an interesting one. Coming back to the C-suite, because obviously with them, it's a completely different ballpark when you're reporting
Yes.
to them. And one of the things that we hear quite a lot is this idea that you should always try and align with the overall business strategy, kind of this North Star if the company has it.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean?
Yeah, I think that means actually paying attention and then thinking about how the work you're doing is going to tie into that, especially if they do have a North Star metric, which not a lot of companies necessarily do. And I'm actually working on an ebook series right now about North Star metrics and how to incorporate them into your reporting. So this is very timely. But I would say one of the big things is like if the company doesn't have a North Star metric, you still need to find out what's important to them. And then don't be like, well, that's the wrong metric to pay attention to. Obviously, the business has decided this is what's important to them. If you don't agree with it, that's fine, but you're not going to change their minds overnight by going in there and saying, your metrics suck. Let's not start the relationship off that way.
Yeah,
So
not a
instead,
great
think,
start.
no. So instead, think about how you can tie your work to those business goals. And I think that that's, people are like easy for you to say but in the reality of it is that you really do need to do this and really think about, how can I demonstrate this? Because rankings don't pay the bills. And I'm sure that people have heard this a billion times by now. I gave a talk at MozCon back in 2014 talking about how to report better. And it's funny because during that talk, I had an offhand comment about how we don't give rank reports to clients. And I got mobbed afterwards. And this was 10 years ago, saying, you don't give ranking reports to clients? Like, absolutely not. You should not either, because that's not how you prove your value. And I think and that's actually was the name of the talk, was prove your value. And it's funny because then at MozCon this year, 2024, I talked again about reporting. It's like, it's just come full circle because we're all still bad at it. And I think a lot of it is that we get really hung up on like, look at this neat thing that I did, but the C-suite does not care about the neat thing that you did. Right. Your colleagues care about the neat thing that you did. And absolutely in those forums, like Women in Tech SEO and whatnot, like share those wins there. Especially if you're feeling solo and you're like, I don't know who else to talk to about this, like find a group that you can share those kinds of wins. But the C-suite is not going to care. The C-suite is going to care about how your work is being tied to their business goals. And so I think that that's where it's really important to find the appropriate places to share the other things that SEOs are going to care about. And then that way you can get that out of your system and then only share the things that matter to business goals when you're talking to that C-suite. So when I think about things like, how do I tie this to business goals? If we think about it purely from an SEO perspective, one of the things I actually recently talked about at MozCon was the idea that attribution is getting more and more difficult, especially in Europe, right? Because you've got consent management tools, you've got ad blockers, right? There's lots of different ways that you have no more tracking. And I've seen some clients of ours in the EU, 60% of people say no to being tracked. So that means that we've only got 40% of traffic, and probably another 10 or 20% on top of that have ad blockers. So really out of 100% of people coming to the website, maybe only 20% of them we can track. So we're making decisions based on a very small subset of data. And so in that case, like, how do you actually prove what's working and what isn't working? And so one of the things that I recommended was tying your inputs to outcomes in a more not vague way, but like in a more general way. So for example, let's say you're implementing technical SEO. Here's the technical SEO fixes we implemented. Did this increase? This could be traffic, it could be conversions, it could be, whatever you've decided to pay attention to. But you're not saying directly like, this one thing that we did increase these rankings and therefore we got this traffic and therefore this happened, right? It's more, here's the input and here's the output, and we can't track what happened in between. But we know that, this North Star metric went up when we did this thing. And so that's really where you can draw, these inputs to outputs. Or for example, we published this new blog series because we want to reduce churn, for example. And we're finding that less people are churning now that we've published this blog series. Do we know that it's directly led to it? No, but this is the bet that we made, that we think that this is going to help, and the churn went down. Therefore, it must be a good input there. And so I think that that's where, if you do really start to read about North Star metrics and how they work, you can't necessarily tie it directly, and that's okay. I think that that's the other problem, is that people with the C-suite get hung up and they say, well, they want exact numbers. Well, too bad. Like, I don't have any other answer except for it's not going to happen. And you need to explain to them it's not going to happen, because there's some Yahoo SEO out there who's like, oh, of course we can track everything. We can't. And we've never been able to track everything.
No, it's a complete like myth. This like 100% attribution that has never existed. So, but it's interesting. One of the kind of the sayings that I always, that I love, I always forget who said it, but it's kind of this idea that, some things that you measure, some things of value cannot be measured, and some things that are measured are not of value. Correct. And it's this kind of like balancing act between quantitative and qualitative data that you want to get right. And I'm always interested in the qualitative as well, particularly now, as you say, that the privacy side of things has just made it even worse. So how do you present that? Where is things like storytelling, for example? Does that play a part in reporting to the C-suite as well?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think how you present the data really matters. Please stop using tables. Please stop. Like, I know,
or pie charts. Oh my God.
No, I'm okay with pie charts.
I
and
don't
I'll explain
like
why.
pie.
I will explain why. So actually, I have a post that we'll include in the show notes for this episode on my website called Marketing Analytics Data is Wrong. Can it be fixed? The answer is no, it can't. But spoiler alert. But one of the things that I have in there is a screenshot of a pie chart that I actually really like using. And okay, so I'll talk about why tables suck in a
Yeah,
minute. Let's
yeah,
talk about pie charts first. So pie charts, the reason why I really like pie charts is because you can layer them on top of each other to show how percentages of a total are aligning. So for example, I'll have a pie chart and then I'll have a donut chart around it. And the inner pie is, say, key events by device, for example.
yeah.
And then the outer donut is sessions by device. And then if the slices line up, then great. Everybody on those devices is converting / key eventing at a correct, at about proportional rate. But if there's a huge discrepancy, then I know that, this one device is really sucking or something else is going on. And you can do the same thing for like by channel. And that way you're not looking at the numbers, you're looking at the proportion. And I think
Yeah.
that this is something really big. And this is also in the blog post that I'll make sure is in the show notes, is the idea of presenting proportions. And then you're getting away from that conversation about numbers. Instead, the conversation is, this is what we can track. So we're going to really look at the data that we can track and we can trust, ignore the stuff we can't track and we can't trust. And instead, we're going to say, is this channel pulling its weight? Is this device pulling its weight? And you can do that by layering a donut chart over top of a pie chart. I do it all the time.
And those are fancy ones. Those are fancy pie charts, Dana. They're not like normal ones.
You can do this in Excel too. You don't even have to use Looker Studio for it. You just need to lay two chart elements on top of each other. And I think that this is where being able to show, do these proportions line up? There's no numbers involved, right? You're just looking at the slices. Anyone can understand it. You don't have to feel like you need a data science degree to get this chart. And I think that's where, particularly when you're going to the C-suite, like don't present things that require some sort of nerd knowledge in order to understand what's going on, and this is where tables are the worst. I get the idea of tables, but if you're just presenting a table with numbers, you don't even have a heat map or bars or anything in the table to make it more interesting, there's no way that someone is going to be able to look at that and in 1 second decide, yes, this person's doing a good job. And you think, well, I spent all this work. They should spend more than 1 second looking at your chart. I agree, but unfortunately, this is the real world that we live in, and this is how long you have to make that impression. So really trying to stay away from tables and instead focus on visual elements that prove your value and prove your point. Is this thing moving the needle in the direction you want to move it in? Is organic pulling its weight when it comes to getting people in the door? So don't worry about the stuff you can't track and instead track the heck out of the stuff that you can track. And there can also be things, the value that you bring is not just in traffic, but it's also in saying the quality of the traffic that we bring from organic is really good. The people who come to the site via organic are more likely to get this far, much further through the checkout process, for example. Maybe you know that there's a problem in the checkout process, but you can prove that people who are in organic get to this part where everybody gets stuck a lot faster. And if only they would fix this part, you estimate that you would bring in X number of dollars more revenue if people manage to get past this one part that is broken, but no one's made it a priority yet. And you can't, decide priorities. It's the C-suite who does. So you can go to them with this information and say, I know that I'm getting people here via organic and we're just like wasting this goodwill. So how about we fix our checkout flow, for example? Or, you can find out, for example, from your sales team, like the leads that you're bringing in via organic, the ones that are coming in via organic, are they of good value? Great.
Yeah,
and I think that's where, you should be able to have those conversations.
That. Yeah. I mean, one of the things, and this is like when I was in house that used to really like put my back up, is not reporting on not reporting on conversions, because all of the reporting is kind of traffic or ranking based, and then you're not reporting on the conversions. And I'm wondering, okay, right, all of this wonderful traffic, is it even relevant traffic? I mean, I've even heard people who SEO experts, SEO consultants, who don't set up key events on, I hate it, key events on now GA4. It was, goals before and stuff.
We're still calling them conversions.
Conversion. They don't. It's not KRO.
Yeah.
No, but it's I've had people who have tried to argue that that's not like part of the SEO service. And I'm like,
I hope those people like doing SEO for free, Because last time I checked, we live in a capitalist society, and the way that you get paid in a capitalist society is by proving you made the company money. You know, and maybe if you work in the not-for-profit world, you're like, well, we don't have to worry about that filthy money, but you do, because something keeps your charity's lights on, right? And even for things like charities, for example, there's I'll send it along another post included in the show notes. It's about how we measure content consumption, which we actually created for a charity where one of their goals was awareness. And we wanted to know not just how many page views we had at the thing, but did they actually read the piece of content? And it's really easy to track with a video. Did they watch the video? Yes, no. Super easy. But for content, it isn't just the page views. Did they spend long enough on the page to actually read that piece of content? And did they scroll to the bottom of the page to see the entire piece of content? If both those things are true, then content consumption was recorded. So I'll send along a link to that as well. We have a WordPress plugin and a Google Tag Manager recipe that you can use to implement this on your website.
Brilliant, because that's the thing, you know, a conversion is different to me, then it's different to you, then it's different to somebody else. And, you know, as long as you're understanding what those conversions are for your C-suite, for the one that you're communicating with, and then figuring out how you're going to track it, you're doing it, you know, you're like halfway there, really. But then there's the communicating side of things that sometimes, so we've skirted around this quite a bit, but what are some of the kind of KPIs that somebody who's just starting would be looking at when reporting to the C-suite? What are they usually interested in, kind of coming back to the basics?
I would say the big thing is, you know, again, tying it to the business goals. So it's going to depend on the type of business, for example. So let's say it's, you know, let's say it's a large therapy clinic, for example. Not necessarily going to have a C-suite there, but let's say, you know, appointments booked per week might be a really important metric for them to look at, or number of things that happen, because revenue itself is not necessarily the best metric to focus on, because depending on what kind of business you're in, it isn't a leading metric unless you're in e-commerce, right? It is more, you know, somebody filled out a form and then later they might end up buying. Or for example, if you're working in law, like it could take months before a case closes, and then the lawyers would know how much money they made off of that. So revenue isn't necessarily the best metric to tie everything to. Instead, thinking about what are the other key metrics that are going to tell me if my stuff is moving in the right direction. And this is where, again, going and looking at the business plans for the company, looking at what their overall goals are, and then thinking about how can I take that and then tie it to something else. So for example, one would be, you know, brand awareness. I hate this one. You know, it's like, well, brand awareness of what? And so that you can work with them and be like, what is our brand awareness now? Where do you want our brand awareness to be? You know, and then you can say, here's the amount of non-branded searches versus branded searches that we can see in Google Search Console. Or these pages are more likely to bring people to the website when they've done a branded search. Or even work with the ads people, because they're going to have good impression data for branded searches if they're running a branded campaign. You know, even sometimes we have a metric of number of competitors bidding on our clients' branded terms. Great. That's a metric too, because it means that they're nervous, which is why they're bidding on your branded terms, right? So if you've got more people bidding on that, awesome. And you can find that kind of information in the auction insights in Google Ads. So I think that there's lots of ways to take that metric and really work with it. But then you also need to make sure to say, like, okay, brand awareness. What is it now? Where do we want it to be? Because also your job, and I know you probably heard about this in school, making goals smart, you know, turning them into something that is specific, measurable, etc. You really do need to do that. And when I teach analytics at the University of Alberta, it's one of the things that I work with the students on is how to I give them bad goals and we work on how to make them good, make them smart goals. And it may just be that no one's ever said to them before, like, we want to make sure we make these goals smart. And so this is how we're going to work with them on that. And frankly, if the C-suite pushes back and they're like, well, these goals are fine, well, you might want to look for another job. Like, those goals are not fine. And the businesses that do succeed in the marketplace are the ones that do have smart goals. The companies who are thinking about the things like vanity goals and whatnot, they're not necessarily going to be successful in the long term.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the things that I completely agree with about smart goals. I think some of our clients as well, and kind of when I was in-house, it's much easier if you have historical data and you can benchmark properly. What happens when there's none of that?
Yeah.
So what do you do when actually, how can you forecast something, like actually forecast something when you don't have historical data available? Is there any kind of tips and stuff?
Yeah, there's definitely some good SEO forecast tools out there. I think certainly, when we look at keyword research volume, you can use that. And actually, Liz on my team just published a great YouTube short on how to even figure out forecasting data for terms that don't come up with any volume. So, especially if
Mm.
you work in local SEO,
Yeah.
it's really hard sometimes because you're like, I'm searching for, say, shoe repair in Brighton. Well, no one is searching for that according to the big tools, but you know that there are people searching for that. So certainly turning to alternate ways to find out volume for these phrases. Or, sometimes you can even just run a Google Ads campaign for a couple weeks on a term. It'll be inexpensive because it's something, pretty low volume. If it's low volume enough of a term that you don't have any volume coming up in popular tools like SEMrush, then try a Google Ads campaign, spend a little bit of money on specific phrases, and then see what the volume actually is. But Liz also has some other great tips in her video, and I'll make sure to send that off to you so you can
Yeah,
include that in the
please
show notes as
do.
well. Yeah.
Please do. Yeah, that's one of the things, particularly when it comes to kind of zero volume keywords. And there's loads of those that are commercial keywords. So,
Mm-hmm.
like I would rather have a commercial zero
Mm-hmm.
than a very, not great intent, super informative. It could be anybody and anything
Yeah.
of thousands a month.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good point to kind of remember it's definitely not all about the volume. It's just trying to
Oh, yeah.
report on
And
that.
more than once, we've had clients where they've had like bad posts that don't have anything to do with what they do, or they're like, it had something to do with them once upon a time, but now it's ranking for all sorts of other stuff. And just ignore that crap. Like, we had a client who's a physiotherapist. We've worked with him for years. And right after COVID, because I don't know, I guess we're done it now, but when it was starting to open back up again, he had this great post about going back to the gym after COVID and things to think about. And it did really, really well. But he's a physiotherapist in Alberta, Canada, and he was getting people all over the world looking at his post, and he still does. So what we did in his analytics is we created an audience of people who never looked at this post and lived in Alberta. And we're like, these are the people we actually care about. And we had an audience of people who looked at that post and like all this other stuff too. Like, anyone who's not in Alberta, like, we just don't care about them. And then when we did his reporting, we only focused on the people who could reasonably go and see him. And, you might be like, oh, but you're ignoring all this traffic. I don't care about that traffic. Like, that traffic's nice. And it was really handy when we tried to get him some media appearances, which we did, which was really great for his local authority for sure. But I mean, that's super nice that someone in the UK found that post helpful, but they're not going to book a physiotherapy appointment with somebody in Alberta because they read a good blog post. So the blog post still exists. His existing clients find it useful, but that isn't necessarily something that we're looking at when we're thinking about his overall, the key event rate. And when we are reporting too, removing that noise can also help you focus and say, this is what's relevant for us. Another example is a client of ours who's a convention center, and they really have two audiences who come to their website. They have people who are coming to concerts and events, and they want to know about parking, and they want to know, what's the set times for the band and that kind of thing. And then the other people who come to the website are people who want to book a wedding or a meeting or a conference. And when we look at their overall conversion rates, and if we're driving relevant traffic to the site, I do not care about the people who have never looked at anything related to booking an event. So again, we have two audiences in their GA4. We have the people who have never looked at booking an event, the booking and event section of the site. And then we have people who have looked at the booking and event section of the site. The people who looked at the booking event can go and look at the other stuff about parking and whatnot. That's fine. They need to know that information.
Yeah, of
But if
course.
you only look at that stuff, then I don't care about you. And when we do our reporting, we only report on the people who've shown intent to actually become a customer. And so that way we can be a lot more focused on our reporting and say, I think it was something like the wedding audience maybe had like 0.1% conversion rate. And then when we focused it down to people who actually showed intent for weddings, it was more like 8% conversion rate. It's like, that's a
Nice.
much better metric to show, because then they're
Yeah, of
not like, why is
course.
this conversion rate so bad? Well, we have all these people that are irrelevant for this. Don't show that. Don't include that. And when we explained that to the board, they were like, oh, yeah, this totally makes sense. Like, this is a good way to report on this, because we don't. And then we have a separate report entirely about, here's the popular things that people who are just going to shows care about. They want to know about these topics. These are the FAQ items that they're opening. And then they can look at that information and say, great, and here's the on-site search terms that people are doing that don't have anything in the FAQ. You should probably add this piece of content. Is that directly relevant to our goals with them, which is getting them book more meetings? No, but it looks really nice when we talk to them about it and we're helping them with other parts of their business because we already have the data. We might as well just tell them, hey, you might want to include an FAQ on this item as well. We're seeing that people who come to the venue are really interested in this and you don't talk about it.
Yeah, and it's really interesting what you're saying about having kind of almost a few versions of reporting. One of them is this C-suite, but then there is real value in kind of having that other audience, particularly in SEO, where, you might have a piece that that it's not going to run any conversions, and it's not really, those people are not interested in booking anything. However, it's very good for building your, we talk about topical authority and stuff like that. It's good for building that because it moves you on these commercial terms more. So you're basically using one piece of article to kind of move a different keyword that's a more commercial keyword. So
so for example, like if you're a big multi-area business like Orkin Pest Control. I'm thinking of this because we just booked them to help with some ants that we have. I live in an area where you have to spray for ants every year, else they get inside your house. So I just had to book them to come out and spray for ants. Our usual guy retired. And so I was Googling, identifying ants because I wanted to make sure I didn't have carpenter ants. I don't. Oof. But, Orkin's site came up. And of course, if I'm thinking about, of course, I put my marketer hat on and was thinking about this, if you have those kinds of identification pages or like how to fix this or how to do that, but then the person doesn't go any further, then I would probably just eliminate them entirely when I'm thinking about people who show intent. You can certainly think about them as part of the funnel. How many people who look at this page do continue on, but they may not be relevant in terms of you don't serve their area, or they just want to do it themselves. And so they're not actually interested in hiring somebody, And so I think there's value in creating those different audiences and determining, who belongs to these different audiences. And one of the things in GA4 in particular that I really like is the funnel exploration, because you can create funnel explorations based on certain events firing. And so when someone would join an audience, such as they viewed this, spider identification page, and then they continued on further and went to find a location, that's a good time to fire an event. You can record an event when they become a member of that audience. And then you can say, saw this piece of content, then actually searched for a location, got to the location, then what happened, right? And then you can say, all right, they didn't call us, or they did call us, we have call tracking, or they left that page open for 6 weeks and thought about it. It's I think that's where showing again your value and saying that this piece of content that we created brings people further into the site.
Yeah.
That's really tying it together, because again, I see SEOs all the time. They'll show a list of page views. It's like, well, that doesn't tell me if the person did the thing that I wanted them to do. I don't necessarily care about landing pages in isolation. I care about landing pages that drive someone to a result. So if this landing page isn't driving people to a result, why not? Do we expect it to drive people to a result? Oh, we don't? Okay, then I'm not going to care about it in our analysis.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a tricky one because, back in the wonderful times of UA. I know you're a fan of GA4. I'm still not, but I'm getting in there.
I'm just going to say that UA did a lot of things for us that GA4 does not. And I think that's why people don't like it, right? And I think that GA4's data model is far superior to UA. UA was really crumbling under its own weight because it's basically 20 years old at this point. So I get why people are sad about UA, because GA4 makes you think, and people don't like things.
The thing is when there are some things like the funnel explorations are really cool. I used to do a lot of reverse goal analysis when in UA. So this is,
and you can do that in GA4.
I know.
In GA4. It's a path analysis. It's a path exploration. And here's your little GA4 tip. Okay, so when you go into GA4, open up a path exploration, then immediately click on Start Over, which is up at the top right, and then you can pick an ending point for your path analysis. And it's kind of hidden, but then you can make your, form fill event or whatever that final goal event is, and then you can change it and say, show me the pages that led people to this event. So it's there. It's just hidden. They don't have a thing for it.
That's the thing. It's not very user friendly. That's why people don't.
It's
don't
built for
like
analysts, not human beings. So it's
true.
Yeah.
I mean, I like to dabble in it, and I'm always super happy when I figure something out. But yeah, I do still miss UA.
I mean, I think I've been using UA since it was Urchin Analytics. I had a client who used Urchin way back in 2004, and so I got to use it right before Google bought it. And I mean, if you compare UA at its death to what Urchin looked like, we've come a long way. So think about it from GA4 as well. Like, we are going to go a long way with this product. I expect we'll be using GA4 hopefully for the next 20 years. And then eventually something else will replace it. I don't know. We'll just like beam directly into our brains what the data was or whatever. Or maybe there will be no more tracking and we don't need analytics anymore, because it's just like we're just back to the beginning where we would spray and pray and we have no idea how many people, you know, did anything except drive past our billboard. Maybe that's our future.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, let's hope not. I'm all for privacy, but it does make it difficult, particularly with the C-suite reporting, because as you know, they can be very, very quantitative rather than qualitative.
I know. And I think,
focused.
I think that certainly things have been ruined by advertisers who took it too far with things like fingerprinting and whatnot. I mean, what I would love to see, and GA4 does do cookieless tracking for people who don't know. So if someone says no to tracking, you can still record some data about them and put them in for modeling. The problem is that every page view is independent from everything else because you can't actually track a session. And I know, you know, if you use tools like, what's the word I'm looking for? Matomo. You know, they're like, we also do cookieless and it's better than GA4. It's the same thing. Because if it's cookieless, that means there's no cookies. And it means that as you go from page to page, it appears to be a brand new session every time you view a new page. So I hope that hopefully there will be some sort of correction where we can track people across multiple pages. I don't necessarily need to, you know, clear out the cookies when they close the browser or whatever it might be, but I would love to be able to track a path cookieless for someone as they use a website. Just to be able to see that kind of engagement. And I think that that's where the current cookie rules are just like a little too far in that way, or the tools haven't figured out a way to work within the cookieless framework to be able to deliver a sessionized set of information.
Yeah, this is it, because you know, it's learning about your website. I can understand when it's like cross-site tracking and things like that.
Sure.
And I ultimately, I do agree with it from a user perspective. But
totally. I use an ad blocker. I'm sure everybody does.
my husband went as far as to use DuckDuckGo. He does not use anything but DuckDuckGo for his browsing.
Good for him.
Every
once in a while, I see someone pop up on our referrals from DuckDuckGo. I'm like, oh, that's cute. Yeah.
Maybe it's him. He's a data scientist, so
maybe it could be. Yeah.
It could be him. He's probably him and 4 of his friends are the only ones that use it. We digress. Okay, so I'm mindful of time, and I want to close with kind of your top tips, really. Okay. So what are kind of your top 3 tips for any SEO who wants to nail C-suite reporting? What do they need to remember?
Okay, stop using tables, number 1. Number 2, less is more. Make sure to present like a single page is the goal, because they don't have time to wade through a 24-page report of you showing how clever you are because you got this, you know, one keyword to rank that didn't. They don't care. So really try to go for as few pages as possible. You don't want to include anything diagnostic. The goal of this report is, are we going to get there in terms of here's our goals? Are we going to meet them? Yes, no. If we're not, we need to course correct. And this is why maybe you need more budget. Maybe, you know, something else has happened in the market. Maybe there's a hurricane that has gone through, like one of our clients in Texas. You know, Houston isn't going to meet their goals this month because they had a hurricane. That's fine. You know, like, but be able to say that and say, hey, FYI, Houston's going to look bad because they had a hurricane. So let's just keep that in mind, right? And try to keep that to a single page. I know that there's this nervousness where people are like, oh, but I got to include all these pages of reporting. You really don't. Sometimes less is more. And if they want to know more, they'll ask and then have more ready to go. But the point of it is really to give them one page that they can do something useful with. And I would say for the third point as well, like, get used to talking to people. So everybody has a webcam on their computer. sit down and start recording yourself talking. And then I know people hate doing this. Watch yourself. Because I watch all the talks that I give because it helps make me a better speaker. And watching yourself speak and realizing your little nervous tics that you do, the words that you say quite a lot, can really help you become a much better, sharper speaker. And people respect good speakers when it comes to presenting things like results. So really getting that nailed will really help you out. I've been doing a radio column on CBC Edmonton AM for 12 years, and doing live radio every Monday for 5 minutes has made me really good at not saying but it took a while to get there. And I think that that's where being able to record yourself and listen back and realize the things that you say, or your little, they call them word whiskers in Canada. I don't know if they call them elsewhere, where you say or ah or any of those words. Make sure to try to figure out how to remove those. I say basically a lot when I'm trying to give myself time.
Me too.
So figure out what that other word is that still makes you sound smart, but gives you time to think about what it is that you're going to do. And there's also a fantastic website called ultraspeaking.com. They have a great free ebook as well. If you're a really nervous speaker, you don't necessarily need to sign up for any of their stuff, although I've heard it's also very good. But if you're feeling uncomfortable about speaking, then Ultraspeaking is a great website to check out too.
Brilliant. Great. Thank you, Dana. I mean, you are absolutely amazing when it comes to kind of resources. I've been playing around with lots of your resources that you share, and we'll put in the episode kind of show notes a few links as well. We're going to finish. I did it now, and I was very conscious of it now that you said it. Yeah, exactly. Oh, I'm terrible at it. I need to.
If you never say it.
I need to take your advice, Dana. So we're going to be finishing off with our wonderful, very full room 404. So basically, room 404 is where we banish anything that we want to banish, anything that has annoyed us. Some of the things that are in room 404 might come back. We never know. Some of them should be in 410. Now, I know you wouldn't agree with me with the GA4 being in 410, but I'm telling you, it's been put in 404 so many times.
I'm sure it has. And it's not going to happen, people. We all just need to accept this new reality.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So what are you going to put into room 404?
Oh, I would have to say actually cookieless tracking. Like, I know I just talked about this, but I get the idea of cookieless tracking. I think it's going to mislead people because they don't understand what's actually going on. What I would love to have instead is not cookieless, but sessionized cookieless tracking. As in, I want to see everything that someone did as a single session. I don't want to see every page view divorced from every other page view without any attribution data, which is why, for example, when people are like, I implemented consent management and now everything is showing up as direct, that's because everything is coming up as cookieless. So I think that that's where cookieless is just confusing people, and I would love to banish it and come up with something better instead. Honestly, that's,
It's going into the room 404. Great. Thank you for a great addition. I do like that addition. I think it's close to my heart as well. And I'm hoping that one will also skedaddle into 410 at some point, but we'll see. If it comes back again, we should do this thing that if somebody is mentioned a couple of times, we should just do a 410 then.
Yes, perfect.
Never to be seen again. Okay, great. So for everybody out there who wants to find you, where is the best place to find you, Dana?
Yeah, I spend most of my time on LinkedIn, actually. I used to do a lot of Twitter, but Twitter's a bit of a trash fire right now. So it's instead, LinkedIn is definitely the place to find me. I publish lots of videos on YouTube under KP Playbook, KickPoint Playbook, which is our handle there. And you can also go to kpplaybook.com, which is where all my writing goes. My recent post about market analytics data is wrong is on there, and our shorts are on our YouTube channel as well. I share mostly everything on LinkedIn. And on LinkedIn as well, I try to share if there's any big changes in GA4. So, for example, there's one actually that just popped up this morning that I'm going to be posting about later today, a new hidden report about the difference between conversions and key events. Very exciting. So who knows what's going to happen in the next few months, but definitely follow on LinkedIn for any sort of GA4 updates. And I also post about major updates to Google Tag Manager and Looker Studio. And I will be getting into Matomo a little bit later this year as well, because I know it's something that's really popular, especially with a lot of European marketers.
Nice. Well, thank you very much, Dana. And I call everybody to have a look at all of the resources that we mentioned today. And anything basically by you, Dana. I've been like swallowing your content, looking at it, learning from you. So
Thank
it's
you.
been
I
a great,
appreciate that.
it's been a great, I'm a big fan. Thank you so much for being here today. And goodbye, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
Bye.